again, and welcome to the Medieval World Podcast. In this lecture, we are going to continue looking at the political developments of the 12th to 14th centuries. In this particular lecture, we are going to be looking at the papacy during the really primarily 14th century, from about 1309 to 1376. And this period of papal history is known as the Avignon Papacy, because the papacy during this period was not located in Rome in Italy. Rather, it was located in southern France in a place called Avignon. So, in this lecture, as we'd explore the papacy during these years, we are going to be asking really just one question. And that is, what was the Avignon papacy? And then a secondary question we're going to be answering, as always, is, why was the Avignon papacy so significant? As we are going to see, there are both short-term and long-term effects of the Avignon papacy. So let's just jump right in. The Avignon papacy kicks off in about 1309, and it's really the result of one specific event, and that is the essential assassination of Boniface VIII at the hands of the cronies of King Philip IV of France. These events we have seen play out in the previous lecture. Now, if you want to hear more about this, I have an episode entitled Medieval Murders, in which I explore this assassination in a bit more detail. Feel free to check that out. So, what happens after Philip IV essentially kills Pope Boniface VIII? The answer? A new pope is elected. And this pope, very importantly, is a Frenchman, and he takes the name Clement V, and he's pope starting in 1305. During Pope Clement V's early reign as pope, he's actually going to be in Rome. The problem is, while in Rome, he experiences some turbulence at the hands of some of the local nobility, and as a result, for his own safety and the safety of the papacy, he moves the papacy and the papal court from Rome in 1309 to southern France, in a place called Avignon. And once there, the papacy begins to develop in a few very important ways. One of the most significant things about the Avignon papacy during this period is that because they are in the French realm, even though it's southern France, where the French king has less control than he normally does in northern and central France, even though he's in southern France, he is still in the French realm. So what is this going to do to the papacy's relationship with the French crown? The answer is essentially become subsidiary to it. In other words, rather than the French crown answering to the Pope, it's going to now be, during this roughly 70-year period, the other way around. The medieval Avignon popes are going to essentially report to and follow the commands of the French kings. And this is going to begin with the reign of Philip IV and all of his sons and grandsons, and continuing on to his distant cousin and the beginning of the House of Valois. Now, why am I spending so much time talking about the Avignon papacy? It's really because not of the French influence over the papacy, but really because of one major title that gets ascribed to it. And the Avignon papacy becomes known as the Babylon captivity of the papacy, or the Babylonian West. And during this period of 70 years, there's a very good reason why the Babylonian captivity of the papacy and the Babylon of the West are ascribed to the Avignon papacy. And that is because of pure opulence. Google sometime the palace in Avignon, France. The papal palace is ornate even by medieval royal standards. It is far and above what the papacy's mission really should be, which is essentially following the life and message of Jesus Christ. Opulence is the exact opposite of that. And for the popes from Clement V all the way down to really Benedict IV, these are going to be anti-popes, a lot of them, but because of their opulence, they are going to be a central figure for criticism. And because of this opulence, it is going to be very easy for later people, specifically Martin Luther, and think of all the Protestant reformers, to look back at the Avignon papacy and say, look, this is everything that is wrong with the church. But it wasn't just opulence that defined the Avignon papacy. Two other major important church corruption aspects also define it, and that is simony and nepotism. Now, what is simony? Simony comes from the biblical story of Simon Magus, who essentially tries to buy a church office, and this is essentially what happens here as well. Simony in the Middle Ages and today is the use of money to pay for something that should be earned through merit. So the buying of a church office. By that I mean the paying to become a bishop or the paying to become a priest. And also it can be paying to forgive sins and other various things. The paying for salvation. And the other thing I mentioned was nepotism. Nepotism comes from the Latin word nepos, which I think has Greek origins as well. Essentially just means the word nephew, or relate it to a nephew. And the reason why I'm saying that is because nepotism deals with family. Nepotism is the granting of a church office or granting some kind of benefit to somebody in your family who does not actually merit that grant. So it is the placing of a nephew or a brother or a cousin on an important church seat, such as a bishopric, or making somebody a cardinal who is a relative. In other words, it is the granting of something of importance to somebody purely on the basis of their relationship to you via your family. So what do we have here in simony and nepotism? We have two things that are very important. We have the granting of church offices, which are supposed to be holy and only granted to those of merit, being granted to those who have wealth and those who are related to you. And what this starts to do is it sets up the stage for the Protestant Reformation. In many ways, the Protestant Reformation is an indirect result of the Avignon papacy. It's going to come about around 100 years later. But the Avignon papacy, beginning in 1309, starts to set the stage for the later Middle Ages, specifically a corrupt and opulent institution that cared more about wealth than it did for what it was supposed to preach, which is the life and message of Jesus Christ. That is poverty, that is caring for the sick, caring for the needy. This is going to be a big problem for the church, and it's one of the many things that it is going to have to address as it starts to bleed members within 100 years to the Protestant Reformation. I want to leave off right here because chronologically I want to start talking about the 100 Years' War, the Black Death, and a few other things. When we pick back up with the papacy, we're going to pick back up here around 1376, 1350 or so, because another major event is going to happen as a result of the Avignon papacy, and that is what is known as the Western Schism, when we go for a period of having two popes and eventually three popes all at the same time. One in Rome, one in Avignon, France, and eventually for a little bit, one also in Pisa, Italy.